Every cult has two things in common. One, they never end well, and two, the leader of said cult is usually a power-hungry egomaniac who can convince and manipulate his followers into committing the most heinous of acts out of nothing but pure fear. So, not a million miles away from communism then. With that being said, some cult endings have buried themselves in human history, whether it's the uncertainty of who fired first at Waco with the Branch Davidians, the sad, lonely tragedy of Heaven's Gate, the infamous brutality of the Manson family, and the downright debauchery and depravity of the Anthill Gang. Small edit, I've just come back to add this into the video later. If none of you have heard of the Anthill Gang, keep it that way. But there is one cult that stands head and shoulders in infamy when it comes to how it ended. The 1978 Jonestown mass suicide. Now this isn't going to be a full breakdown of the cult of the People's Temple. If you want a more in-depth experience of how they got to this situation, then I highly recommend you go and watch Count Dankula's video about it, because it is just incredible. And if it wasn't for watching his video, then I wouldn't even know that this aspect of the video that we're going to be talking about today even existed. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you are not aware that this aspect of the Jonestown mass suicide exists either. I do have to give you a small rundown of the events that led up to this situation, just so you can get a bit of an insight into why mass suicide was considered their only option. In August of 1977, the leader of the People's Temple, dickhead Jim Jones, fled California, or their base in California, to Guyana. I don't know if I pronounced that country right, and I don't care. An article was going to be published about Jim Jones, and this article was actually sources from people who had defected from the People's Temple. This article was going to be scathing, highlighting his financial fraud, his abuse of his followers, and his downright authoritarianism. There's going to be a lot of words in this that I'm going to mess up. And if you're also wondering why I'm wearing a hat, it's because I've not been awake long. I'm incredibly hungover from having to listen to the research for this video. Please bear with me. After fleeing to Guyana, over the course of the next couple of months, over 1,000 of the People's Temple's followers would join him in their new compound in Guyana called Jonestown. Back in America, family members of the cultists had rallied together and lawyered up in a chance to get their loved ones back, but also to bring Jones to justice. In November of 1978, US Congressman Leo Ryan decided to visit the compound to find out why over 1,000 of their citizens had migrated, and also to see if that the family's complaints were actually true. This visit, and other visits from outsiders as well, had actually been rehearsed by the cult, you know, to put on a whole charade that life was fine, you know, in the People's Temple and now at Jonestown, and it wasn't actually the dilapidated socialist shithole that it actually was. Upon leaving, Congressman Ryan gave the cultists a chance to leave with him, of which 16 did. There was a bit of a scuffle that ensued with this, but Jim Jones actually said it was safe for them to leave. On the surface, that's what he said, but inside, he was seething. When the congressman, his entourage and the defectors arrived at the airfield, they had to wait for a second plane to come pick them up, one that was big enough to take them all at the same time, because Congressman Leo Ryan didn't want to leave anyone behind if they made 2 trips in a smaller plane. So while they waited for the second plane, they were unaware that Jim Jones had sent a patrol of foot soldiers their way. When the Jonestown henchmen arrived at the airfield, they just opened fire. Survivors managed to flee into the jungle, but unfortunately 5 people were killed. 3 journalists, 1 defector, and US Congressman Leo Ryan. Now I don't need to tell you that whatever part of the world you're in, if you kill a US congressman, they're going to send SEAL Team 6 after you. Jim Jones was fucked, and he knew it. Now all cults have their own sort of doomsday prophecy, if you like. And Jim Jones with his followers had actually practiced mass suicide multiple times, calling these events White Nights. But now, with the US government going to be coming hard at him, it was time to put this into effect for real. Jonestown was cut off from the rest of the world, kind of like communism, as I said, and Jim Jones had been feeding his followers non-stop bullshit about this outside war that was coming from, making it easier for them just to and quote as something we say quite regularly today, drink the Kool-Aid. It was time to execute the plan. Execute is probably not the right word there, but fuck it. It was easy for him to convince his followers to go out on their own terms and not at the hands of this imaginary enemy that was coming to kill them all. Jonestown was a predominantly black town. Jim Jones considered himself an early version of a social justice warrior. So in his own way, to save the lives of 1,000 black people, he also convinced them to kill themselves. For those of you who do know about Jonestown, those of you who have seen the aerial pictures of the bodies laying everywhere, you do know what is coming next. But what a lot of you don't know, and I wasn't aware of this either, is that the whole thing was recorded on tape. Kind of Jim Jones' final testament, if you will, and he live edited it during. Edited is a word that I struggle to say. Fuck off. These are called the Jonestown tapes, and I have listened to them, and you can find it on YouTube. I highly recommend you do not, and I am not going to play any of it for you either, because, you know, the sound of people dying is not something I actually want to promote on here. These tapes are 45 minutes long. As said, they are live edited all the way throughout, because when the children closer to the microphone started screaming and crying, that's when he paused it. What's really eerie about this is what he wanted you to hear. He cut out the bits he didn't want you to hear. So everything you can still hear on it is what he wanted to get out there. And I'm going to break these tapes down for you bit by bit as we go through. Hope you're ready. The tape starts with Jones talking on a microphone through a PA system that surrounded the ground's interior, so he could waffle to them day and night and get in their heads. It's very much his final testament of, and also just stroking his ego. He's saying stuff like, how much I tried to give you all a good life. And everything he is saying is being met with his followers with applause and cheering. He accuses the 16 defectors as being the ones who has made their life impossible, even stating that no one will take my life from me, I will lay my life down, which was met with more agreement from the close cult members around the pavilion. I mentioned before that if you've seen the aerial photos, it is a big field, but there is a main pavilion in the middle, which is where Jones was doing his speech from. He then states, if we can't live in peace, we die in peace, which is met with more applause and cheering. And by this point, there are children crying in the background. 3 minutes in, he states that this death will be kind to their children and to the elderly, and that they should take the potion like they did in ancient Greece. He also states that this is not committing suicide, this is a revolutionary act. I have to hold my script up for this next bit just because it's a bit blocky and I have to say it. But 1 minute after that he says, anyone who has a disagreeing opinion, please speak. And one woman did speak up about why should 1,000 lives have to be lost just because of the 16 defectors. And she even suggested going to Russia, where Jim Jones claimed that he had communist friends that could help them out. But he batted it all away and was hell-bent on them all committing suicide. He even says, but if we leave our children, we will leave them to be butchered. I live for all, I die for all. And by this point, the children are now imbibing in the cyanide. And it's during all of this that there is still applause and agreement coming from the crowd. The next couple of minutes is him just waffling on about how much of a saviour he is, how much of a prophet he is, a reincarnation. Some other cult members get a chance to get on the microphone and refer to him as Dad, their leader. And the next sort of 10 minutes is just this Bible schizophrenic psycho babbling of just this self-grandiosing love for himself, whilst children are starting to die around him. And before I go any further into the actual poisoning, there is something that you should know, particularly if you're a fiction writer, because this is what caught my attention. Cyanide poisoning is not like it is on TV or in the movies. You know, maybe one of those spy movies, a spy gets captured, so he takes a cyanide pill so his captors can't get any information from him. It's not quick and it's not painless. It takes 5 to 6 minutes and it is excruciatingly painful. And why Jones chose the children to drink first was because once the parents had seen their child die in this way, it would make them more compliant to take the cyanide themselves. 22 minutes in, after much ego stroking and just general nah. 22 minutes in, and after much ego stroking, it is now becoming clear that there is some apprehension from the crowd, and some people are even starting to doubt whether this is the right thing to do. By this point, Jones is now urging people to drink from the punch bowl, saying that if they don't and they don't give their lives up, they will be tortured, and their children too if they do not take it. 26 minutes in, and it is now officially an order to line up and start drinking the cyanide. A lot of people do not know this, but it was not a choice by this moment. It was now people being forced by Crossbow to start lining up for it. And one of Jones's followers, a female, can be heard lying, saying, "The reason your children are crying is because of the bitter taste, not because it's painful." 29 minutes in, and the children's cries are now turning into wails of anguish, whilst Jones is still talking over the top about how much of a prophet and a saviour to them he is. And his female speaker takes the microphone and has to start speaking louder and louder just to try and deafen them out. Bear in mind, I said this was self-edited during the whole speech, so by this point, the children at the front have already passed away. It's the children at the back that you can hear, and they are getting louder, so loud that she has to raise her voice. Over the next couple of minutes, the children's voices just start fading away one by one. They're still there, but it's not because they've stopped crying because there's no more pain. It's because there is no more life in them. And the number of children just slowly whittles and whittles and whittles away. When I said that Jones didn't give a shit about the dead children around him, he actually says, "I'd rather see your children lying there like that right now than dying how the Jews did." I have to hold my script up here again because this is just so fucked up. I can't try and remember this in my head without it scarring me. But 36 minutes in, he says, or he orders his followers to stop the hysterics and die with dignity. "I don't care how many screams you hear, how many anguished cries, this death is a million times preferable." He called on the parents who were holding their child who was dying this agonising death to stop with this overreacting nonsense and silence them. 41 minutes in, and he orders the larger vat of the cyanide-laced fruit punch to be brought out, so now that the adults can start partaking. There is clearly a big editing jump in here because by the time the audio restarts, there is no more children crying. There is a unnerving silence, and the final thing you hear from a person is at 43 minutes. It sounds like his female follower, the one who lied about the pain earlier, and it sounds like she's almost choking or gargling. And there's another big editing cut to no more human noise. And the last 2 minutes of this video is this fucking music playing over the tannoy. It's this weird orchestral kind of choir-like, obviously it's a Jesus compound, so it's bound to be that kind of music, but it is just this haunting choir-like just sound. I can't even call it music, it is a sound. And then what becomes even more haunting is, for this 2 minutes, this is the music that was playing over a field of nearly 1,000 dead bodies. I listened to the full 2 minutes of this, and now that music is now scarred into me. That music is death. That is now what I associate death with. It's fucked up. It's so fucked up. And if all of this isn't enough to sadden you or piss you off, then this next bit is really going to get under your skin. Jones did commit suicide, but he shot himself. He didn't drink the poison. So that's the end of the Jonestown tapes, and at the end of it all, 909 souls were lost. The reason I do this Beyond Fiction series is because there's a lot of stuff that happens in this world that I think authors should know about when it comes to writing, because particularly if you're writing something in what is very real based and grounded, people are capable of amazing things. You know, Carlos Hathcock and Benavides, you know, two inspirational Vietnam soldiers. And the incident like the Krakatoa video I did is to show you what our planet is capable of. But Ian Watkins and Jim Jones, when it comes to writing protagonists, I've been a bit sort of, I don't want to say inspired by cults recently, that's going to come across really weird, but I've been watching a lot of cult videos just to get into, see what can make a person not only be that way, but how you can convince a whole group of people to do your biddings. So if you are an author out there, then yeah, these people do exist. Approach these videos with caution. You never know, you might get something out for a good antagonist in your book. But this has been your boy, Pembroke's Own. If you enjoyed what I've just put myself through for you and you found it somewhat educational, please leave a like. If you're new here, please subscribe. I am currently uploading once every week. I would like to get it to do 2 or 3 times a week, but I'm not quite there yet, especially with writing my 3rd book and having a full-time job. In the Beyond Fiction series, if there's an event or a person you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments and I'll do some research on it. But as always, much love, take care, peace.